You guys are listening to the Coach Sam Show. I have a really, really cool guest on today. His name is Adam Hastings. He's been a producer for some really cool films that he'll tell you about here in a second, including God's Not Dead. I'm sure you guys have heard of that film. And he also has founded Lift Entertainment. When you think of people who have stepped into the world and used their gifts to be a light in this world, I think of guys like Adam. I got to meet Adam actually through his wife at Markel. I do leadership coaching with Markel right now, and found out who Adam was through her, and we got connected, and I thought, what a perfect guest to have on here. So Adam, thank you so much for joining me. It's awesome to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Great to be here today.
All right, so Adam, give me a background on you from you. It's something that my brother and I do, like when we'll interview some people, but we want to hear it from you. Talk about you, talk about how you got to this point at Lyft Entertainment, but would love to hear that from you.
Sure. Well, the long story short is that in my early 20s, I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona. I had some family that was living there and some friends, and just kind of needed a fresh start. At that time in my life, I hadn't quite found my way, hadn't quite found a career. Um, that I was passionate about that also like felt sustainable long term. And I had done some things in music and just worked in retail and but just needed hadn't quite found my footing yet. So I ended up in Phoenix and during that time I ended up working at a company called Pure Flix Entertainment. And I was employee number three at Pure Flix. And this would have been back in about 2010.
Yeah.
And at the time, PureFlix was just a straight to DVD producer and distributor. So they're making, movies for, really thrifty budgets and releasing them straight to DVD, which has become almost obsolete these days. But
Yeah.
back then, it was still working. And at that time, I just had a chance to kind of dig in and figure out as many pieces of that business, production, marketing, distribution company, as I could. So I was answering phones and doing accounts payable and shipping DVDs out of a closet,
Yeah.
managing post-production schedules and marketing plans, and just it was just a an invaluable level of experience. The amount of things I had the chance to dabble in at that time, and being a part of that company at that moment was a huge gift. Fast forward a little bit, we released God's Not Dead in 2014, and I was just one of the marketing guys on the film, part of a big team, but was kind of overseeing it for the studio for PureFlix, and it was a calculated next step for us, but we didn't know what was going to happen or how big or significant that would end up being. And so it did about $60 million in box office in the United States and about 100 million worldwide, and ended up being is now one of the most profitable independent films at all of all times. And was just an anomaly and just a gift and a really unique moment in time.
Yeah.
So as we expanded, at that time, the choice was made to kind of build a theatrical distribution company, off the back of that success. And so at that point, I kind of got to pick my lane, and marketing and distribution were the things that I liked and was passionate about. Probably a little more marketing than distribution, but yeah, that became my next few years, and we kind of built that out from scratch, and got the chance to work on a bunch of great films and with a bunch of great producers. Everybody from Dallas Jenkins to the Irwin brothers, and the team in house at PureFlix. And so, yeah, that was just a cool time. That also came with its fair share of difficulties, but in 2017 felt like the Lord was kind of moving me on and that there was kind of something new in store. And so I exited PureFlix, was independent for a little bit, and then ended up getting a job with an agency in Nashville, which is where I live now. This company called Working Title Agency. So moved to Nashville to oversee all of their marketing efforts, and we got purchased by a company called K-Love, which is the biggest radio network, Christian radio network in the country, and got to make movies for them for a few years and release them, which was awesome. And then, a little over 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, again, kind of felt like something was shifting. K-Love decided to pull back from what we were doing a little bit as an organization and kind of go a different direction and focus more on radio and not necessarily other forms of media. And so at that point, I decided to start Lyft and just kind of decided it was time. I'd worked for a couple other, media companies and knew that it was kind of time to take a little bit of a risk on myself, for me and for my family. And so, yeah, I've been doing it for, almost 2.5 years now. Still doing a lot of marketing. So I market theatrical release films. So films that are going into theaters specifically, for smaller studios, distributors, independent producers, and also have been producing a couple of things on my own. So that kind of
Awesome.
catches us up to today.
That is all. It seems like everything has prepped you for that, right? Does it kind of feel like that? Like all of your work that you talked to me about like 15 years ago, doing the grunt work, so to speak, and then moving on to having that huge breakthrough kind of with God's Not Dead. And then it seems like everything from there has kind of prepped you to do this on your own, I would say. Is that kind of how it's felt for you?
Yeah, it doesn't always feel that way, but
I'm sure.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that I've enjoyed about having my own company here over the last couple of years is, in different phases of my career, I've gone through phases of, where there's days where you're like doing the work, where you're like actually doing the thing, when clients say like, what is it? They say to me, what is it that you actually do? And you describe that. When I started Lyft, a couple of years ago, I went back to really doing the work. I was no longer leading a team, no longer had, a lot of resources at my disposal. And so you just kind of have to dig back in and figure it out. But I seem to have had those points like at a few different times over my career where, I've had to revert to actually doing the work. And I think that there's something really healthy in that because it keeps you grounded and it keeps me experienced and has kept me sharper, I think, in what I do. And so I'm grateful for that.
What do you mean when you say act? Like, give me specifics. What does that mean? Actually doing the work for you. What does that mean?
Yeah, like in the entertainment business, especially, things that happen in LA and other places, there's big teams of people who are like, coming up with and executing these marketing plans. And yeah, sometimes it takes somebody to lead them and set strategy. And there's some really, talented people that do that. But for me, kind of where I'm at with it mostly being just me, I you know I don't have the luxury of kind of outsourcing the work. So
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
setting the plans and managing the budgets and and creating media buys and organic marketing strategies. And so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Got it. Tell me a little bit about your background growing up. Like, how did you become a follower of Jesus? What does that look like for you? Because obviously,
Yeah.
everything in this film entertainment career for you has been in this lane of inspiring faith-based films. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the most part. So yeah, so I was raised in a Christian home. Um in southern New Hampshire, and the area of the country that we grew up in was fairly conservative, and um but it wasn't a non-denominational church. And yeah, when I was about 15 or 16, my family moved to the mission field. We moved to Guatemala,
Wow.
and my dad was called to lead a ministry over there. And that experience was just invaluable to me, both just as a human, and I think also just a believer and a follower of Christ. And just there's a lot of things about that time where faith becomes real, because there's just a lot of things about your normal everyday life that aren't
100%.
present and are kind of constantly changing. And so so that was pretty formative for me. And so yeah, I would say somewhere in my like late high school, like early college age years, was um when I actually became a follower of Christ. I don't have like
Yeah.
as specific, like of an aha moment, because it was definitely like a transformational, process for me. And so yeah, so that was kind of my story, and honestly had to work hard, and the Lord had to work hard in me to get to that spot. I was definitely a stubborn individual as a young man, and still can be. But but
I'm
uh
not
but
stubborn at all.
yeah,
I'm totally perfect, and I have
of
never,
course, of course, of
no doubt.
course.
Just ask my wife. I am not stubborn one, but no, just
Yeah,
kidding.
that's the real test, right?
Yeah, I describe it to people as like for me, similarly, like there wasn't like this one moment for me that I could necessarily point to, but it's almost like flying over a border. Like you don't really know
Yeah.
when exactly you crossed over into that next state, but like you realize, oh, I'm different than I was 3, 5 years ago, whatever it may be. So it sounds similar to you. Like I grew up in a Christian home, but it didn't become my own probably until like junior year of high school. And I
Mm, of
remember praying something to the effect, like I went to a Young Life camp. I don't know if you've heard of Young Life before, but I went to a Young Life,
course.
uh,
Yeah.
and like that decision night. And I remember being conflicted. I was like, Lord, am I already? I thought I was already in. Like, do I have to say? Have I ever said this? I remember saying something like, Lord, I don't know if I've ever said this, but I'm all in. Like I remember saying that, like my junior year. And maybe that was the point, but I also probably would have told you a year before I was. Does that make sense? So like you don't really know
Hmm.
what that point was of that heart change.
Sure.
But I do know, even from that moment, obviously, we're not perfect from that moment. We're still like shedding off this old self and stepping into this new reality, this new spiritual
Mm,
reality. And there's moments, even after the quote unquote decision, whenever that was, there's still moments where God takes you through deeper and deeper levels of freedom. And usually
yes.
those seasons suck, right? Like usually those
Mhm.
seasons are not fun. From whenever that season of life was till now, are there any like maybe one to three moments where you're like, man, the Lord was really working in me and humbling me and like taking me into a new level of freedom? Was there anything like that for you?
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I mean, when I made the decision to, leave the area that I'd grown up in and move to Phoenix, that was a big one because, um, I had a lot of freedom in the sense that like I was like a young guy in my early 20s, and I had a job that was okay, and was able to, I guess, like sustain my own livelihood, at least from my perspective. But I didn't, I was pretty like short-sighted in that, and like the Lord used like my parents, and some other people around me to kind of really challenge me and like think about like what I was moving towards, for the rest of my life. And that was kind of one of the things that incited me, like moving to Phoenix, which was definitely took a little bit of a hit on my ego to kind of leave everything I had ever known and my friends and kind of my life there, which was important to me at the time, and then into something new, which ended up really kind of setting up the rest of my life, and it would look drastically different if I had never done that. So all the way down to meeting my wife and having my family, and so just really grateful for that. I would also say, I talked a little bit about the time, like leaving my job at Pure Flix and kind of what that led into for the rest of my career. Um, for the sake of time, I don't always, share these details, but I actually got fired from that position, and um, you know, there's things in it that I have had to own, and with the people that were kind of around me during that time. Um, and it was really hard at the time to kind of process through and bounce back from. But, I wouldn't change it for the world because, I just learned so much about myself and kind of my own shortcomings, and also just like, watching other people around me, kind of react, to conflict and difficult things, within business. And so, in the entertainment business tends to be very volatile, you know,
Yeah.
especially from like a career standpoint. All you got to do is read, the Hollywood trades or Deadline or Variety, Hollywood, people are losing their jobs every day,
Yeah.
sometimes for legitimate reasons, because of the shrinking of the business, or the different waves that it goes through, but other times it's just people, you know,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of personality conflicts and clashes, and so yeah, so I've been caught up in that, on both sides of the fence, but yeah, those were two like very formative
Yeah.
moments for me. And then I think like, a more positive one would just be like when I made the decision to kind of leave my last job and start my own company, it was very obvious that it was what I was supposed to be doing, but also pretty scary. I'd always kind of lived under, being employed, at a company full time and kind of having the 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 cush of the weekly paycheck and not having to wake up in the morning, like being
Yeah.
responsible for that, and
Yeah.
how all that plays out, and it's like, running my own business, it's very different, and there's a lot of reward, that can come from that, um but it's also challenging, but at the same time just extremely grateful for that process, and kind of being able to see that through. So
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Like, yeah, like I don't know how much I've told you about my story and what I've done and all that stuff, but I was drafted to the Rams. I played football, was drafted to the
mm,
Rams in
nice.
2017. Similar to what it sounds like the film industry is like, the NFL is also your
Yeah, I'm
phone's getting
sure.
cut every day, right? So like
Sure.
I got drafted in April of 2017, and then I got cut a few months later in August of 2017, put on practice squad,
Mm,
which basically you just practice and don't play. Uh,
mm,
and I wish I could go back to myself in that moment and be like, hey, be grateful for this. Like, I know you're always looking, trying to how do you get on an active roster, but be grateful for this moment. 8 months later, I got cut like officially, like not like practice squad opportunity, got cut. And then
mm,
was bouncing around and training and got picked up by the Bills. A couple weeks later, got cut again. And maybe in a similar way, I had this somewhat public failure, right? And that can attack your ego. And I probably would have had the right answers before then of like, hey, my identity's not in football, my identity's in Christ. And maybe similar to you, like, hey, my identity's not in my job, my identity's in Jesus, right?
mhm.
But then when you're met with that, when you're met with getting let go, when you're met with getting cut, it's like, wait, hold on, Lord, like, what are you stripping me away from? And you actually experience a new level of freedom on the other side. And you're like, oh, I'm now looking back. Yeah, that season was tough, but now looking back, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for what I have now, like who I am
Mm,
now, and the just the things that have come up of it. So it's cool
yeah.
to hear you say that. And I mean, not that you are like I would encourage you. That's a part of your story. You don't need to be hesitant to share that. That's a part of my story. Like
Mm,
that encourages a lot of people that are probably even people that will listen to this. Like you look at the heroes of the faith. I think when you were talking about your story, I think of Abraham, where the God said, like, go to a land I will show you. So like that's like your trip to Phoenix, and that's like your the steps along the way. It's like this vague like urge to like go to this random land I'm going to show you.
yeah.
And he's like, I'm going to be with you. And then when Abraham gets there, it's not even his land. He can't step foot in it yet. There's a famine in the land, and it's not exactly the dream yet. But that's
Mm,
the Lord. That's the way He works. He's preparing this new generation. So anyway, yeah, don't be hesitant to share that. That's really cool to hear that. It's cool to understand what led you to this point, to taking this huge risk. And you're right, there is a risk in that, in starting your own thing. Huge risk, huge risk. So
yeah. Thank you.
yeah, man. I will always respect people that step out and try to do things on their own. It's something that, like, similar to you, I eat what I kill, right? Like, so
Hmm.
leadership consulting stuff, there's not like a list of clients that I just have to keep in touch with. It's whoever I get, and you're selling yourself, and that sometimes can be awkward and
Yeah.
sometimes can be different. What has that been like for you? Because you got to go before, I'm sure, maybe investors or a group of people and say, hey, here's the vision. Talk me through that and what that looks like, and how are you getting clients right now? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Great question. So, yeah, I found that it takes a lot of intentionality and just clarity about who you are and what you're doing and what your business is. And when I first stepped out, I wasn't great. I don't think I was great at that, at kind of clarifying like what Lyft is, what I do, even everything down to branding and like website and like I just it just wasn't. It's funny, you'd think like, oh, he's a marketing guy, like he knows that all that stuff's important, he knows to do it, and I just didn't, to be honest.
Yep.
And I even kind of thought, I think I even thought when I first jumped off that like things would make me look a little different, that I would spend a little more time producing and a little less time marketing. But one thing I learned, I think, kind of in the first 6 months is just that having that clarity about what your business is and what you do and what you want to do is really important, especially when you're sourcing, that business. And so I just felt this huge kind of momentum shift happen when I was one, like intentional about being out in front of people, that I have this theatrical marketing consulting business, and this is what I do now,
Yeah.
and being in front of people, keeping relationships, active, and but also having good branding and making sure that like messaging within my website and my LinkedIn and like just all those things is like there and kind of all set up, and something that people can access. And yeah, as soon as I got better at all of that, I really felt things shift, like specifically in the last year. So, a lot of my clients, um, are relationships that I've had for a long time. They're people that maybe I've known even from other places that I've worked, in the past, and some of those have kind of come back around, which is just a huge blessing and a testament to relationship. And but I also, I'm also constantly, kind of working to meet new people and kind of network and, in new circles. And, the movie business is primarily in LA, as much as you hear all these things about kind of it spreading out different places, it's, you know, most of it's there, and so I spend time there, and making sure that I'm in contact with people that I know there, and also kind of expanding my network.
Yeah.
So
And you said you're currently also working on producing some things as well. So you're marketing on one end, but you're also working on your own stuff in the background. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yes, yep. I've been producing 3 documentaries with some friends of mine that actually live in Phoenix. And yeah, we're making 3 movies. One is called The Case for Miracles. It's with a Christian author and apologist named Lee Strobel,
Yeah.
who's yeah, Lee's just awesome, and I think a huge gift to people of faith and modern day Christianity. And so this we made a documentary with him a few years ago at my last agency, called The Case for Heaven,
Yeah.
and it was pretty successful. And so we were able to make another one. So yeah, Case for Miracles coming out at Christmas. So December 15th, it'll be in theaters for 4 nights as an event.
That's awesome.
So yeah, thank you. Thank you. Been working on that for a while and really excited to kind of get that out into the wild. Doing a couple others, one with a skateboarder named Steve Caballero, who was,
Okay.
you know, part of the Bones Brigade in the 80s and 90s, and just a really significant part of skateboarding history and culture. And it's the doc is, kind of part his personal story, part like skate culture and kind of what was going on at that time, and then also his faith journey,
Wow.
kind of within all that. And so it's kind of turned into like a little outside of Steve's story. It's turned into a little bit of a who's who of skateboarding. So we've got, Tony Hawk and Rodney Mullen and Lance Mountain and Stacy Peralta and all these like huge personalities in it. So we'll release that sometime next year.
That's so
But
awesome, man. Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Again,
Thank you.
I'll go back to this. God does call us into risk. Like you look at that, like all throughout scripture, there is a risk element where it's like, all right, will you trust me and go out on your own? And you've got to do that. I talked about before, like how those jobs might have prepared you for this, but maybe even those faith steps prepared you for this bigger faith step of starting Lyft. You know what I mean? Like there was that faith step of going to Phoenix, and there's a faith step of even when you were let go, there's a faith step of like just putting your next foot forward and seeing what's next. And you're right to say this too, like all the relationships, you got to do a great job just staying in touch with these people and treating them well because you have no idea what's going to pop up. It's really cool. I'm going to be checking that. I know my friends and I will be checking out the Case for Miracles. My mother-in-law actually gave me that book. There's a book, Case for Miracles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's put out awesome stuff. The
Yeah.
Case for Christ, I know we watched that movie because there was a movie on that. Were you
Yep.
involved in that at all? Or
Yeah, I was a little bit back during my time at Pure Flix, but yeah.
that's cool. That's really
Yep.
cool. All right, let me ask you a question. I'm going to make this like really pointed and answer as honestly as you can. The Christian movie industry, when I think they're all great, they all make you feel good, right? Like they're all like, especially if you're a believer and you watch them. Why is it also important to make sure we do these well, that they're not just the cheesy film? Does that make sense? Because sometimes the Christian movies and the Christian shows, although I think it's gotten much better over the past 15 years or so, there was this stigma that like, yeah, Christians will watch them, but they're kind of just cheesy films, maybe not great, whatever it may be. Why is it so important to do these well? Is that a fair
Yeah,
question
that's
or no?
it's a no, it's a very good question. I'll answer it as succinctly as I can. Um, I think as Christians and believers, we're called to do things, in an excellent manner. And, I believe that God's got that higher calling, on our lives. And to be honest with you, within movies, sometimes it's easier said than done.
Yeah,
We're competing with studios who have, $100 million budgets and, unlimited resources. And it's not always that, it's never that way, within
yeah,
independent faith-based film. And so it's really, really challenging. But I have seen the industry and the space grow, a lot over time, not just in terms of the business, but also the quality of the storytelling. And, God's brought some really talented people, in and out of the space. And I think it will continue to grow, and the opportunity for it will continue to grow, as long as there's people around who are focused on the excellence and the power of the storytelling. And even if you look at the general market side of the business, um, they are saying the same thing. You know, it's like what if you listen to any executive or journalists talk about like what makes a great movie, it's always at the end of the day, it's the power of the story, and a good script. And yeah, that can be like within big IP like Toy Story or Pixar, but it also can be, in an original film or idea,
yeah.
and that's been proven many, many times. And so, yeah, I do think that's something that, in the modern age of the entertainment business that is kind of like struggling to kind of find its footing, amidst like all the changes that have happened with streaming and post COVID shifts and all that. It's easy for that to get lost, but I think we're coming into a time that's going to be really important and critical to kind of maintain that, not just on the general market side of the business, but also for Christians who are fortunate enough to be able to be involved in this way.
Yeah, what you said in the beginning of that too, like we're called to do things excellently. Sometimes there can be this thought of, and I know you would not agree with this thought, neither do I, but sometimes there'd be this thought of, oh, well, I'm a Christian, so people should just like appreciate it and people should just buy it. Even if they're other Christians, they should just support it. It's like, yeah, but we're called to do things well. Like if I'm running
Hmm.
Train Up Academy with our friends and we're running this private Christian school, we can't just be like, all right, well, since we're a Christian school, you've got to join. It's like, no, we've got to we got to be good. We've got to be good,
Hmm.
right? Like even with our football team. So like I'm in a public school. It's not a Christian school. It's a public school, and we have like a mission of building better husbands and better fathers. And it's like it sounds great, but it doesn't matter if we're not any good. Does that make sense? Like we've got to be
Yeah.
good. We've got to be good at what we do. What's been cool is seeing over the past 15 years, God's Not Dead as an example, but like even the case for Christ, and I can't wait to watch this documentary, The Case of Miracles, but it's been cool seeing these things done really, really well. You know, one of the examples I'll bring up, Angel, I don't know if it's Angel Studios or what the exact name is.
Yeah. Hmm.
We just got that subscription this past week.
Sure.
And because I wanted something that my kids could watch, I have a 4 year old, 2 year old, and newborn, that was like
Yeah.
good cartoons that weren't just like normal stuff. And watching young
Yeah.
David, I was like, this is actually done really well. And this is fun. And my kids are singing along
Yeah.
with it. And it's
Sure.
important. You use the word critical. It's really critical for believers to do this well. When you say this is a critical time, talk to me a little bit more about that. Why do you believe you are called for this time to kind of influence the entertainment industry? I guess.
Yeah. Great question. Yeah, post COVID, there's a lot of opportunity for independent content to be in theaters. We went through COVID and strikes and streaming, and it's just been a difficult time for the entertainment business, specifically, the theatrical film business. It's quite frankly, it's on a decline, not the opposite. And so that has opened up a lot of opportunity for more people to kind of enter in the doors and be a part of it. But at the same time, it doesn't mean it's easy, and it's still a really challenging business, and you can read all kinds of things in the news about, the studios consolidating, and, Paramount just sold and Warner Brothers is for sale, and, the streaming companies are probably all going to consolidate at some point, right? And so like there's lots of chatter about, the consolidation of that business as a whole, which is a little bit scary, to read about and to see. But at the same time, it's I think it's also just a privilege and exciting to be a part of an industry like that, like during such a critical time, because I believe that if I can kind of stick it out and be a part of, whatever curve that we're going to see eventually, or like when it happens, that it's just, a huge opportunity, for those of us that stick it out and that can continue to be a part of it. It's like, I don't know if you ever heard somebody talk about, there was like a huge boom in realtors, right? People getting
Yeah.
their real estate license after COVID, because there was all these houses being sold,
All right.
and then all of a sudden the market tanks and like all these licenses expire, and everybody,
Yeah.
and but, like I have a friend who kind of weathered that storm, and like he talks about, like, if you stick it out, you're a part of like kind of the refining moment, and you can make it through to the other side. There's like huge opportunity for those who stick it out. And so I want to do that, like
Yeah.
I love what I do. I love being a part of, the business at multiple different levels. And I'd love to look back in 10 years or 15 years and, be able to say that I was a part of it during that kind of critical moment, and, and that the industry was able to find ways to adapt and to grow. And not just for business purposes, but just because I've seen, the power of entertainment and how it can affect people.
Yes.
And you know, people love to kind of make their own art and stories, but like at the end of the day, when you're doing it, you're making it for other people, and like the way that it impacts them, and so like, who's the audience you're reaching them, what are you reaching them with, and why are you doing it, and so yeah, I'm really grateful just to be a part of it. It's an exciting industry. I've been, kind of shepherded by some really like great and just talented people, and I love I love that and just want to be able to continue to kind of be a part of that world.
Yeah. When you say that some of these bigger companies are going to consolidate, is the fear that, and I'm a novice to all of this stuff, so help me out here. Is the fear that they will consolidate, create this giant conglomerate that would just dominate the rest of the field? Is that kind of the thought? Like, or what's the, you said there was some fear
I,
around it. What is that?
I mean, I think there's some things in place that would keep it from becoming one like super company, um, but yeah, I mean, even if you think to like, back, I don't know what it was, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, Fox was bought by Disney, right? So you had like 6 or 7 major studios, and then one of them got bought, right? And
Yep.
then, we went through COVID and, some other things. And then, and then you had just recently, right? Like Paramount was bought by this big, massive tech company, right?
Got it.
And now there's talk of, Warner Brothers being bought by, another company. And I think like the concern that creates is not necessarily that like one of them is going away. I think it's more that like when you look at the, there's a lot of movie theaters in the United States. It's like over 4,500 individual locations. It's a big piece of like our culture and our society. But if you walk inside most of those movie theaters, there's also anywhere from 10 to 30, rooms and screens. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's a business that's really, really unique, kind of in that sense, that it's scaled to house a lot of people. And so to keep all that running, to keep those screens filled, to keep people, in the screens and in the building, you also have need the product to go on the screens, right?
Yeah.
And back to the conversation we were having a few minutes ago, like I think what we're finding in this day and age is that the product doesn't just need to be there, it also needs to be quality, right? And it also needs to be like a story like worthy of telling. And so within the consolidation of these big companies, some of the concern is like, okay, so if Warner Brothers goes away, is that 20% less content, to go on these
Yeah. Yeah.
screens, you know?
Got it.
Um, so yeah, it's an interesting time.
Yeah. 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 But you hit on this earlier, like those who stick it out can get rewarded, right? Like those who don't give up, those who don't throw in the towel can get rewarded. Let me ask you this. This could be true of like the mega church culture or whatever. Like the temptation might be, hey, because this is like a massive business essentially, we might want to cater to tickle the ears of people instead of sticking with maybe what we believe, not maybe, sticking with truth, right? Is that ever a temptation to just do what maybe the people want, even if it's not true? Does that make sense? Like you see some people bending on values and maybe biblical truth just because that might sell more. Does that make sense? Is that fair to ask? Like, is that ever a temptation? How have you seen people navigate that?
Yes, definitely a tricky dynamic. Because, you know, similar to what I just alluded to, for movies to be successful, people have to watch them, and so you're always kind of crafting the story and the creative in the film, thinking through like how can we reach more people, right? And
Yeah,
so it is a balance to tell the story that you're called to tell, in the way that, you know, God would want us to tell it and honor that, but at the same time, um have it be digestible for, a large group of people. And uh I think that's one of the things I love about and respect so much about Lee Strobel, is that he has a really large and significant audience, that follow him because he speaks truth,
yeah,
and it's biblical truth, it's factual truth. He was an investigative journalist, and a
yeah,
lawyer, and
yeah.
that's just his personality. And um, so yeah, but I think he's proof that, if you honor that and kind of honor what God's called you to, that can be rewarded as well. So yeah,
100%.
his platform is bigger than it's ever been. he does all these mainstream podcasts and talk shows, and he goes and he's on Sean Ryan's podcast multiple times a year, and Tucker Carlson, and all these other places, and it just has a lot of really significant um, impact in different kind of corners of you know different social corners and political corners, and just but he always handles himself with a lot of grace.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome. Yeah, like especially his story, right? Like being a skeptic and yeah, that his story in itself moved me. And scripture talks about that. Like we defeat the enemy with the power of testimony, right? And like there's
hmm
something powerful. You've been saying this a lot. There's something powerful about a story. And you guys being able to put that story together, not to fabricate, not to exaggerate, but just to tell it honestly and purely will help the story come to life. Like Paul even talks about, he's like, I didn't come to you with persuasive words. Like I just presented the gospel and the stories themselves as true, and they are, right? So, yeah, and I just think God's going to honor that, like God's going to honor you guys doing it the right way and doing it with excellence. It's not an excuse to not be excellent, but doing it with excellence and telling the pure story. So,
yeah, thank you.
yeah. Man, that's so cool. It's cool hearing people again that step into culture and say, I'm going to make a difference. How connected do you feel to the overarching mission? And what I mean by that is you're starting Lyft. It's in its foundational stages. You're 2 years in, right? And a lot of the focus is like, how can I get Lyft up and running and successful? And how can I do that well? But also understanding that I do think you're in a time and place where our culture, our society needs Lyft. We need people like that. How connected are you to that overarching mission as well as working day to day? Does that make sense? What I'm asking? Like, how much
Yeah,
does
I think
that motivate you and inspire you?
Yeah, I think so. Does it motivate and inspire me? Yes. But I think what I've found is that if you're kind of faithful in the day to day, and in that piece of it, the Lord will kind of guide,
Yeah,
overall vision and opportunities. And so yeah, just every day it's, you know,
yeah,
doing the best I can for my clients, the projects that, are in front of me, at any given time, and, doing the best we can there. And, and also, yeah. And yes, having a vision, for what it grows into, and how to get there. And, to the conversation we were just having about, the consolidation of the business and this being a critical time, like, honestly, I think for me now, what that looks like at this moment is different than what it would have looked like 3 or 4 years ago, or 5 or 6 years ago. Just because I sense that this next year or two, could be like a refining moment, that
yeah,
there could be some tough seasons,
yeah,
but I think being aware of that and having
yeah.
having a plan, to be able to get through that is better than pretending like it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, like you're hitting on this in the beginning, right? Like, yeah, I'm connected to the mission, but at the end of the day, I got these day to day things that I got to do well. Like, I have my clients that are right in front of me. Sometimes we get
hmm
distracted by this big goal vision that we lose sight of what God's put right in front of you. It's almost like we take a second in the beginning. We're like, all right, God, you've called me to this bigger mission. Now it's call this client. Now it's write this letter. Now it's send a package to this, whatever it may be. And you're doing these little things really, really well. And every once in a while, especially in trial, that might come up, may not. So these tough trials coming up, you remember, all right, I'm called to something more, right? Like, all right, it's bigger than this. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to remember his promises, right? So it's good though. Like
hmm
you hit on the beginning that you can tell you're not a person that's easily swayed in a good way by getting distracted with too many big things. You're going to keep it simple and right in front of you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. It's really cool, man. Uh, Another question I have for you. Gosh, it slipped my mind. Oh, when someone watches one of your films, what are some things that you want them leaving, feeling, and thinking? 'Cause I'm sure it's similar with all of them, but like, what is your hope after someone watches your film? They're what?
Yeah, I think you always want people to feel inspired, you know. Um, whether it was like, whether I was talking about Case for Miracles and just, you know, God uh, working in the lives of everyday people. A lot of people need that hope, you know, or it could be, I mentioned like the Steve Caballero film, like with that, it's like, you had a young kid who had like a severe form of scoliosis in his spine and was told by the doctors that he should probably never play sports, period, never mind extreme sports, and go on to be one of the, best skateboarders in the world. Um, I just think giving people a sense, a sense of hope, is really important and can be really powerful and impactful,
Yeah.
and um, it's talk about there's one of the great things about the movie business is there's a lot of different types of movies, and they have different tones and different creative, and um, sometimes the story, just it might not be a hopeful one. It might be really depressing, but if you kind of look through the span of time of like the movies and stories that stick with people and that people are inspired by, it's like it's those movies that have a sense of hope, you
Yeah.
know like you think about like the Star Wars trilogy, or even sports films like
Yeah.
Rudy, or Remember the Titans, or it's these stories that leave people feeling inspired,
Yeah.
in their own everyday life. And I think that exists within faith, storytelling, and also, in just general, inspirational stories as well.
Yeah. And I don't know if you agree or disagree with this. I feel like the story of the gospel is written on everybody's heart. And you see the story of the gospel recreated, maybe repackaged in other ways. But
Yeah.
I really think you guys have the leg up. You're retelling the story of the gospel through different people over and over and over again, which is the story that actually inspires us to our core. And what you're saying, it brings hope to people. So,
Yeah.
man, I'm really encouraged. Thank you for taking some time to sit down and just chat with me about it. I know nothing about the film industry. I learned a little bit today, but what I'm pumped up about is you're using your gifts to be a light in this arena. And it's so needed. It's needed for people like me. It's needed for my kids. I'm pumped that we get to see these documentaries that you're creating right now. So the Case for Miracles, and then what's the name of the one? The skateboarding one. What's the name of that one again?
Yeah, it's called Defying Gravity, the
Defying
legend of Steve
Gravity.
Caballero. Yeah.
Sweet. That
Hmm.
is awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, man,
Yeah.
I'm so appreciative of you. Is there anything I want to leave you with this? One more thing from you. Is there anything that you would encourage people who are just starting off in their journey? So, like, think of you going to Phoenix, just starting off, maybe hesitant to take this step of faith. Maybe it's similar to you when you decided, all right, I'm going all in on Lyft. What would you say to people in that area?
Yeah, I think having the courage to step into something new, is definitely, it can feel really scary, and it can be challenging. But yeah, we always kind of, I talk to my producing partners about this all the time. It's just like, one foot in front of the other. That's you know, problems can feel big and real, and sometimes they are. But typically just taking the step and moving forward will create that momentum, in your own life or your business or whatever, or your family or whatever it might be, to create change or move towards what you want or need to move towards. So I've found that helpful. I tend to think, the way that my mind works, I always think through like all the things that need to happen to get from like A to B. So it's really easy for me to get bogged down with like, well, if we're trying to get there, that's going to be really tough because we have to do this and this and this and this and this along the way. But I just have to kind of remind myself to just, you know, keep
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
and move to the next step. And I think just the way that the way that God's wired humans, as if we keep moving, we can fix, each problem and kind of keep going. So,
Yeah, don't worry
yeah.
about how you start. Just start. Like
Yep.
don't worry
Exactly.
about that.
Yep.
Man plans his way. God is focused on steps. Right. That's so cool, man. Well,
Yep. No doubt.
Adam, thank you so much for hanging out for a little bit. I know you're busy getting Lyft up and running. Pumped to see those films, man. You're doing an awesome job. What you do matters, and I just appreciate you taking some time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Sam. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks so much.